Small business creation, technology innovation are vital to the health of economy and an important pillar for the innovation economy. I have two, soon to be three, excellent panelists who are going to join me in discussing SMEs, but actually it's more going to be startups and the development of the tech economy here in the UAE. So let me start by introducing our speakers. To my left is Iman Al Mahmoud, who is Program Manager for Shira. And Shira is a Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center. You're a government body and accelerator incubator, is that right? Oh, and we have Noor. Come on up. Hi. Just here's fine. Yeah. And there's the mic. Okay, and then to my left is Walid Hanna, founder and managing partner of Middle East Venture Partners. Walid is an old friend from Beirut. You're a VC firm. You have offices in Beirut, Dubai, and Silicon Valley. And you invest in early and growth stage innovative companies. And you have one of my favorite companies, Fish.
Oh, that's your favorite one?
It is. It's definitely my favorite company.
You should take another look. There are many other exciting ones.
Excellent. And to my right, I have Noor Shawa. Welcome, Managing Director of Endeavour UAE. And Endeavour, we've had Endeavour speak at our Euromoney conferences. We had them in Saudi last week and Jordan. You're a not-for-profit organisation, and you mentor, is it mentorship, and accelerate high-impact entrepreneurs, is that right?
Yes, we actually connect entrepreneurs who are past the startup stage with mentors who are successful entrepreneurs and C-level executives to really help them take, let's say, a $5 or $10 million business to make it into a $150 or $100, $200 million business.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So let's crack on with the questions. Iman, let me start with you as our Emirati panelist. What is the UAE's vision for the SME sector and the startup sector? And how can startups and SMEs become the engine for sustainable growth?
If you'd allow me, I'd like to start off with a small introduction about Shira'.
Please.
For those who are not familiar with the initiative, Shira' was actually launched a little earlier, last year actually, so we're a little over a year old now. We're the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center based at the American University of Sharjah, a government initiative chaired by Sheikh Abdur Al-Qasimi.
Yes.
And we support startups and early stage entrepreneurs in their journeys, whether they're students or alumni of the entire university city. Going back to your question, I think as the government of the UAE slowly and deliberately moves away from an oil-based economy, you would see a lot of emphasis being placed on knowledge-based economies and a lot of initiatives being spun out in that direction, one of them being Shira'. And SMEs is very much at the core of a knowledge-based economy. A lot of support is being given to incubators, accelerators. A lot of funds are being established, and a lot of support is being provided in that direction. So I think going back to the question of how SMEs can actually, or startups, play that role, it is a collective ecosystem effort. It's the support from everything from laws and policies to ecosystem supporters such as ourselves, VCs and funding being provided to them, and I think we're definitely headed in that direction.
Great, thank you. We actually have a live poll. I don't know if DigiDave can bring it up. So on your app, I hope you've all got your app, there's a button that says interactive poll, and on that there's a question for you, the audience. Do you think the UAE provides an environment that enables entrepreneurs and SMEs to thrive? So here we go. You're gonna start voting, and I'm gonna come back to you all in a minute. No, I mean, you know, let's talk about this. I mean, does the UAE provide an environment for entrepreneurs? Is it a good environment? I do these panels all over the region, and often we talk about the UAE. The UAE is the place that people come to set up their businesses. Perhaps you could talk to that.
I think the answer is yes, but it's a more complicated answer than just saying yes or no. I think relative to the Middle East, it's probably the better place in terms of really enabling SMEs. There's a market here. The government is very active in terms of really making sure that it continues to improve. That being said, just like any other market, there's room for improvements. But I mean, we as Endeavor, we have presence in 27 different markets around the world. One of the things we noticed in the UAE when we set up a little more than 3 years ago is that there's a very consistent trend of entrepreneurs outgrowing other markets in the region, being Lebanon, Jordan, even we're starting to see from Saudi Arabia, Egypt. We're starting to see a lot from Greece and Turkey that their next step is to come to Dubai to really hit the GCC market.
Yeah. I mean, this was said on my panel in Saudi last week.
Yeah.
That the problem is they have these entrepreneurs and people starting companies, but they come here, you know, to set up and to grow.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing for the UAE.
Yeah, I mean, for us, these entrepreneurs are still supported by their account managers, but it's a good thing because it's evidence to show that it is a good environment for entrepreneurs. There's definitely room for improvement, but I mean, we started here 3 years ago, and the environment is significantly better today than it was 3 years ago.
Okay. Willie, let me come to you. I mean, how many companies have you invested in, and how many are here, and how many are... Give me some stats.
All right. We manage 120 million US invested. 80% of that is invested in about 40 companies. Out of these, we have at least 15 to 20 that are residing in the UAE now. And out of those 15 to 20, I would believe at least 5 or 6 moved out from Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt to the UAE. So yes, it is attracting regional companies. We're investing in one company now that's moving from Singapore to the UAE. That's one of our conditions to invest in. And by the way, MEVP moved our company. We moved our headquarters from Lebanon to the UAE recently.
Yeah. And where do you see the future great Emiratis companies coming from? You know, we have examples, but in what sector, or, you know, what is the next going to be the next big thing?
I'm a tech investor, so my answer is naturally from the technology verticals. And that's what we invest in. We strongly believe in that. We've been investing in that for 6 years and have seen a huge amount of growth in early stage internet businesses, what we call marketplaces, on-demand services, everything related to the shared economy. Recently, we invested in 3 or 4 different second-hand fashion, luxury, retail businesses. So there's a lot of traction there in particular.
Great. Eman, what do startups and SMEs really want from policymakers and finances here in the UAE? I mean, you have a lot of young people that are coming with ideas. What do they tell you? Oh, you know, it'd be great if this could happen, or I could get this, or, you know, the financing side. Tell me a bit from your experience.
I think this is something that we were somewhat unexpecting when we first started Shara, and we first started receiving all of these different applications and the students who have ideas they want to work on. We automatically thought that funding would have been their #1 issue, and we made sure that our accelerator program had a funding component, and it was an equity-free grant. It wasn't a loan. We had no equity stake in these companies.
So that's a pretty attractive thing for a startup
Absolutely,
to have. Yeah, okay.
Especially with the mindset of the students here. But what we've also realized in terms of laws and policies is that a lot of these students are on student visas, and they're only in the country on that premise. So basically, on the onset of their graduation, they have, I think, 30 days or so to switch that visa to an employment visa, or to either their parents' visa or some other arrangement, which is obviously not enough time for them to start a business, get a license, and put their visas on it. So that was something that we actually realized was an issue we never thought of.
Yeah.
And I think there has been a lot of conversation now with the ministerial cabinet around changing that law and allowing either talent visas, those who have certain skills, or entrepreneur visas for those that are not quite ready to acquire a business license. So there are definitely solutions that are coming.
And the policymakers clearly listen and adapt, and they do it quite quickly, unlike other parts of the world where it does take a long time. Now, is access to finance the main challenge, do you think, for your startups? You know, what is it that's the most challenging thing? There's a mic problem.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So we work with companies at a later stage. They're past the startup stage. We call them scale-ups, just to differentiate, because their challenges, by the time we talk to them, they've already addressed all the challenges with the visas and with the setup costs and everything. They might have some challenges in terms of being able to get more talent on board, or very specific talent from different countries. But we find that the challenges they face when we're talking to them tend to revolve to access to capital, access to talent, and access to markets. A lot of the entrepreneurs at our stage, especially in the Middle East, because the markets are fragmented, they outgrow their market relatively quickly. Then the next step is to go to Saudi or Egypt or somewhere else. So that comes with a different set of challenges. Their talent issues tend to revolve around really transitioning from having a team of really good implementers to a more senior team that can take executive decisions in their functional roles. And then access to finance is a big problem, because most of them are looking at further stage growth. So a lot of the technology companies are looking for VC investments, and there are some great VCs out there, but not enough. So it's more of an investor's market. So they would ideally like to have more choices. Access to financing from banks is very significant problems for companies, non-tech companies, because the companies we work with are a little bit they're a bit of a lost child. So they're larger than the startups, but they're not really treated as a large corporate. So they're somewhere in between. And they tend to get really, really, really aggressive rates from banks. Even that's if they get something from banks. So I think that's a real sore spot for entrepreneurs to really, because they have something, they have a fire that they need to put more kind of fuel behind it to really let it grow. And it is a challenge. It's not the only one, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, so there's not enough risk capital, and the banks aren't willing to lend.
I mean, there's two sides to the story. I mean, I'm sure if you ask Walid and other investors, they'll say they want to see better quality and more experienced entrepreneurs, which is a very valid point, and I think that will improve over time as the market matures. But there's still less options. From the entrepreneur's eyes, there's less options. There's 4 or 5, really big VCs, and then the rest they have to resort to finding kind of little late angel investors. But the debt financing, some entrepreneurs don't even bother going for it because they know they're not going to get it.
Well, coming to you, with Circular 331 in Lebanon, there was a massive growth in the number of VC funds there, and actually there were so many funds, but not enough good companies and ideas to invest in. Can you just tell us, how that works from your perspective here in the UAE?
Out of those 22 countries in MENA, moving away from Israel, Lebanon is the most funded per capita, unfortunately. It's a very small country in which there are 9 funds. This is due to a central bank initiative that over-flooded the market with $600 million for a tiny, tiny market. The UAE comes second in terms of availability of funding. And then, I don't know, maybe Saudi or Kuwait, I'm not so sure. So UAE is extremely well positioned. I think it's a good equilibrium, because in Lebanon there are too few good deals and a lot of money chasing those. Valuations are off the roof. That's why we're not really interested in the Lebanese market anymore, and we're more focusing on launching a new fund in the UAE, and we moved our headquarters here. So the quality in the UAE is amazing, quality of the pipeline.
Yeah.
And it's just because the talent, the UAE has managed to attract talent globally, or at least regionally, towards Dubai. the best of the entrepreneurs in Amman, Beirut, Cairo are really coming to Dubai, and really beyond that. Even Saudis. We have a couple of Saudi entrepreneurs starting their companies out of the UAE.
Yeah, and yeah, yes.
I just want to add one thing. I think one thing that's also starting to happen in the UAE, which is very important to keep in mind, is that we're starting to have a few generations of successful entrepreneurs, such as Samih Duqan, now Ronaldo Mshahwar from Souq.com. And these entrepreneurs who have achieved success, whether it's through an exit or achieving certain level of revenues, are very important to the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And as they stay in the market, they become investors, but they have an incredible amount of knowledge that the next generation of entrepreneurs can really benefit from. And that, as long as the UAE continues to maintain them within the UAE, that's a real advantage that the UAE needs to make sure that it maintains.
Yeah.
That's really the secret behind a place like Silicon Valley, is that you have this generation of entrepreneurs that when somebody's starting up, they have access to. It's a very rare experience that these entrepreneurs have.
Yes, they turn into mentors and actual angel investors, and
Yes.
it's a.
Yeah.
Amanda, let's talk about you've got talk about Sharjah. So you have we were talking earlier today about how Sharjah is a great place for entrepreneurship and a great place for the private sector. But how do you get the companies that are created here in Sharjah to stay in Sharjah?
There are, of course, a lot of initiatives that have sprung up around entrepreneurship in Sharjah, one of them being Shara', and you have the Chamber of Commerce doing some interesting things. There are a lot of free zones that are up and coming that we're collaborating with during this period. But I think something interesting that a lot of government entities as well as corporations are doing now is taking a more active role and taking a lot more responsibility in supporting the startup ecosystem over here. An example of something that we have recently done is a collaboration, a partnership with the Sharjah Asset Management. That's a sovereign wealth fund here in Sharjah, where they have dedicated 5% of their procurement to startups from Shara', either in our accelerator program or in our Minassa membership program. So that's their way of supporting startups and ensuring that that they actually have the sales that they need and they get the support that they need.
Great. And coming back to the finance side, we've got tomorrow we're doing a panel on payments, and we'll be looking at crowdfunding. Crowdfunding exists here in the UAE, but it hasn't taken off yet. I mean, there's Beehive, which is the debt side. There's Eureka, which is the equity crowdfunding. Is it, if it hasn't taken off, why hasn't it?
That's a very interesting question. I have no idea why it did not take off, but yes, there are many, many players now. There is Zumal for project crowdfunding, there is Eureka for equity crowdfunding, and there's both Beehive and Liwa for crowd lending. I think crowd lending is taking off a bit better. Eureka has been around for many years, and we haven't seen big numbers yet. And Zumal has its own issues. It's about educating the market. I think the consumer, the UAE and the regional consumer, is not really ready for crowdfunding. It's very unfortunate. They need a lot of education. As for any new sector, educating the market is really key and takes a lot of time.
And no, have you found that any of the the entrepreneurs that you are mentoring have gone down the crowdfunding route?
So some of them have gone through the crowd lending route, have worked with Beehive, and it confirms what Waleed said. They've gained more traction on the lending side. The issue that a lot of our entrepreneurs tell us is that the amounts that they can get from these crowdfunding sites are too small.
Not enough.
So it would be capped at maximum 500,000 or maybe 1 million dirhams. And the entrepreneurs we're working with are looking to raise 3, 5, up to $10 million. So the amount of effort that goes into raising 500,000 dirhams is not going to move the needle for them. So they prefer to go directly to the VCs, or when they're raising, let's say 10 million or above, they start looking outside for international investors. But some of them have worked with the crowd lending websites for more working capital and for smaller projects in between, more, I guess you can call it bridge financing. But I mean, I think they're eagerly waiting for it to pick up enough for them to be able to really leverage it, especially on the lending side, because it's very appealing to entrepreneurs to be able to leverage it for lending at better rates than what they would get from banks. But I think there's an education in the market to show that there's this traction, that the companies that they're getting are paying back and they're responsible. And the more track record they have, the more investors or lenders or investors they have, and then the more entrepreneurs will actually go to it, I think.
Let's talk briefly about the bankruptcy law. Where are we with the bankruptcy law? Do you know, Noor? Is it, has it been passed and it's?
I don't think it was passed. It was
Okay.
announced, but it hasn't passed. I personally haven't seen much details on it.
Okay.
But I know entrepreneurs are very eager to see it. I think, if we're thinking about the impact it will have, if you really want to think big, if you think about companies like Facebook's or the Twitters of the world, there's a real element of risk involved in these companies at the early stages.
Yeah.
They really are thinking very big. There's a really big leap of faith where investors need to kind of put a lot of money behind them, and the entrepreneurs are taking a chance. And these companies, which we call the diamond companies, that can really either transform a business completely, an industry completely, or they can crash and burn very quickly. These entrepreneurs will not be able to flourish in an environment where there's no bankruptcy law. So they'll tend to go to the US, to the other markets. The ones that would stay here in the absence of a bankruptcy law are the ones that are running proven business models, and it's really about containing the risk so that they can keep it running as much as possible.
And the bankruptcy law should open up new forms of financing, should open up, so the banks, who have been burnt here, they should be open to, lending to these smaller companies. Walida, tell me what you've worked globally, what impact the bankruptcy law will have here.
I remember in year 2009 when the crisis hit, I remember seeing hundreds of cars thrown at the airport with just people fleeing their debt obligations. This might not happen anymore. Okay, that's the good side. On the other side, what I fear might happen with this new bankruptcy law, well, it's good to give the entrepreneurs a chance to restructure their debt. Okay, it's good for the banks in one way, but I fear the banks might not lend that easily today, because they know that if an SME is unable, well, if the guy in charge knows that he's not going to end up in jail, just maybe he's going to avoid paying his debt. So I'm trying to see it from both sides. Yeah. Well, if I was a banker, I wouldn't be very happy with this bankruptcy law. I'm pretty sure my default rate will increase on the short run, but it will expand the whole economy in general, for sure, because the more companies are lended, the higher GDP growth, more employment. So it's good for the country.
And do you want to make a comment about the bankruptcy law and its impact?
I think it's more or less reiterating what the gentleman said earlier. I think the SMEs and the startups are looking forward to it. Yeah. The banks are looking at it with a little bit more trepidation. But until it comes to effect, or until we see the practical implications of it, no one can tell.
And we've talked about finance, but what other challenges do entrepreneurs face in the different stages of their growth?
Well, I can tell you the entrepreneurs that we have been working with that are relatively younger of age. I think the average age of our previous cycle of the accelerator was 25. And if you remove one outlier, it was actually closer to 21 or 22. And for this type of composition, or for our specific cohort, the talent was in abundance. There was nothing that they couldn't technically build if they wanted to. The challenges came from actual strategy decisions or business development decisions, where you wouldn't find the maturity or the market expertise or the industry insights that the other entrepreneurs would usually start at other stages, where you would find the average age, I think you were saying earlier, is 38 for your portfolio of companies. So that's usually supported by the availability of mentors or experts that we usually bring for them. But that's, I think, a main key is actually validating an idea first, or having visibility of the market and understanding where the opportunities lie.
Yeah, Noor, I mean, from your perspective, what do your entrepreneurs, what are the biggest challenges they face?
So other than the access to capital markets and access to talent, we tend to find entrepreneurs, I'm a bit, it's difficult for me to give you one answer, because entrepreneurs we deal with, we're sector agnostic, so with the entrepreneurs we deal with are quite different. They are, the average age is older, the businesses are more mature. Most of them, the issues tend to revolve around, I've made this thing work, I know it's working, and I want to get it to the next level, I want to accelerate the growth. To me, it's the equivalent of, the business has gone from childhood to adolescence, and it's really trying to find itself, what will adulthood look like. So for some entrepreneurs, it's a matter of really defining what the next steps will be. For some of them is realizing that they can make it so much bigger than it is today. But for a lot of them, they've reached a plateau where they don't really know what to do next. So, in the early stages, a lot of them are technical, and they need to have the maturity to do the business development. In the later stages, they have something that's working. It's just, I don't know how to make this, let's say, $5-10 million company be $50 million. So this is where they start seeking mentorship, somebody who's kind of been through that before, because the stakes are much higher, the risk of failure is much higher, the business is much more complex, and for them, they want some kind of a sounding board, or somebody to kind of tell them, you're doing this well, focus on this, drop this, to kind of just help them really think through it so they can define what the next stage will be.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for my panel? Does anybody want to join the discussion? Are we all?
We have a gentleman here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Victoria, this is just a small remark.
Yes.
You said funding is not available. I am from the IFC, and we have hundreds of institutions there who are willing to fund, but they need a commercially viable, business proposals. We get a lot of ideas, and the feedback I'm getting is that there are a lot of people who come up with, some fancy ideas which will not see the light of day. Okay, but as far as funding is concerned, it's available in abundance. So anybody with enterprising idea, the IFC is the place. They can come in with a proposal, and then they can get funding. The other thing is that the IFC have launched FinTech Hive. It's not an incubator program, but it's an accelerator program. So anybody with a proven concept who wants to grow, who wants to be global, then the IFC would support and fund that project. And we do have a lot of partners who can provide mentoring as well as funding for that concept.
How does it work linking? I mean, obviously there are lots and lots of players in the UAE. And are they all linked together? Does everyone know what everyone's doing? Is the ecosystem functioning properly? Because do your entrepreneurs and the people you're mentoring know everything that's available in the UAE?
Yes and no. There is a lot of time being wasted with entrepreneurs going to the wrong investors. Yeah. So, we've seen some startup entrepreneurs go to private equity, which is a total waste of time for everybody. There are some non-tech entrepreneurs going to VCs. So there is a matching issue. So I can tell you, when we started 3 years ago, the ecosystem was very fragmented.
Yeah.
And I remember my first week, I went to an event that was kind of gathering some entrepreneurs, and at the time there were a couple of entrepreneurs there who had been in business for 2 years, and they had just met each other just that night. Now I think it's a little bit better, but there's still some fragmentation. So entrepreneurs go to their investors, they go to their incubators where they started, they go to the programs like Endeavor to say, I'm raising investment. I've spoken to this one or two investors. Who else can I speak to? So there are connectors who are kind of bringing people together, but I think there's still more room for that to improve.
And in Saudi Arabia, they just launched the SME Authority, and we had Dr. Ghassan on our stage last week. There isn't such a thing here in the Emirates, and is that because you don't really need one?
So, I mean, I have an opinion on this. I think these initiatives are great, but our philosophy at Endeavor is really based on a grounds-up approach.
Yeah.
We really believe that an entrepreneurship ecosystem, the thriving entrepreneurship ecosystems are really built by entrepreneurs. So when you have entrepreneurs that achieve success, they're the ones that kind of foster the next ones. That's really where we see most of the real effectiveness. The government initiatives, I think, are great when they're enablers. I think it's a big mistake for everybody to kind of sit back and say, well, what is the government going to do to enable it? It can't do it by itself. It can enable it. It can be really a facilitator to make the playing ground much more effective, but the activity has to be ground up.
Iman, yeah.
So basically just reiterating what Noor was saying earlier, these kind of ecosystems that spun up, either things like what's happening on Boulder or what's happening in Silicon Valley, they have to be very organic. But in order for them to actually happen, you need a critical mass of startups that have been operating for a number of years, qualifying them to become mentors and then later on investors. There is a certain role for the government to play, but it isn't to control and structure everything. It's just to provide the environment that allows these ecosystems to actually happen.
Enablers, yeah. There's another question in the audience, sir.
This is Muhammad Aboud. I'm from IBM. So just to add on what our colleague from the IFC and what you've been saying, so we're working a lot with governments to enable them to enter this new economy that's been written with code and APIs. And we've worked closely also with Shira and a lot of other incubators. And we're willing to also help any idea, whether it's from ideation or taking it to the next step, and probably working with also Walid and Noor and anything related to technology, how to scale up, and having a robust technology partner, we're more than happy to help.
So we should come to the DIFC for funding and then to
IBM for technology.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that's good. I've got my idea. I'll be coming to you soon. Any other questions from the audience? Is there anything else that the UAE can learn from international experience? I mean, you've worked in the Silicon Valley. Is there stuff that's happening there that we could learn from and we can use and adapt and build on?
We have one out of our 18 team members. Just one is based in Silicon Valley. He's more of a venture partner, and his role is to really learn what's happening there and bring back the knowledge. But there are two more things he does. He's very well connected with the Arab community there. There are multi-networks like TechWadi, LabNet, etc. So he kind of evangelized the fact that come back to the region. So he offers opportunities for Arab entrepreneurs to seek funding from this part of the world. And on the other side, he helps regional companies into networking and meeting the required market partner or investor or exit partner in the US. So that's his role in particular. But we don't have a lot of ties to the US. The ties we have in this part of the world are closer to Asia, Europe. Americans are not interested in our part of the world. They just have more important markets to care about, like Latin America or Asia or Europe. Middle East is really on the bottom end, right before Africa, and that's it.
Well, little do they know, the Americans. So I just want to pull up the final poll question. So do we see our result? Do you think the UAE provides an environment that enables entrepreneurs? And I think that's a resounding yes. So I'm going to end the panel on that very positive note. And thank you all very much for attending and waiting patiently for your lunch. Please join me in thanking my panelists, Waleed, Aman, Noor. Thank you all very much. And join us tomorrow morning. So we're going to be starting nice and on time at 9 o'clock. We have His Excellency Dr. Abaid Saif Al-Zaibi from the Securities and Commodities Authority. He'll be opening at 9, and then a keynote with His Excellency Marwan Al-Saqal. It's a keynote interview. So please join me tomorrow. Thank you very much.